What's good, YouTube? It's your guy, Pretty Boy Hanzo, the one and only. And today, we're gonna get real personal. We're gonna get real personal. Today, we're gonna talk about two vital things. And those two things are depression and anxiety. I chose to talk about these two things because, let me be honest, these are two things that I'm facing right now. These are two things that I've been facing throughout my life. And I'm not ashamed to let it be known. You know, I'm not afraid of judgment. You know, I'm not afraid of, being looked at any different way. But respectfully, I believe it's something we all have in common that we all don't talk about. Because we figure we go seek help professionally, we don't be transparent and talk about it. But even though these two things are treatable, they always not, they aren't, And I say that to say this. My depression and my anxiety has gotten a lot worse lately. It came in through many forms. Expectation, being overwhelmed, It came to in current events that have taken place. It came through many forms. This is why I come to beautiful views like this, and glance, and I take a minute and I breathe, because it's most needed. I don't feel anyone that has this problem, should be judged or looked at in a certain way. I hold it to the utmost respect, with the person being honest. When things don't go our way, we worry, Even when we're, starting new things, the anxiety kicks in. My biggest anxiety point was, came along with accountability and consequence. My depression started from childhood, from my childhood trauma. It's not as easy as people think, when living with these two, things, Like I said, this is me being transparent, and I'm not doing any editing, to this video. I'm doing it live so you guys can see. And you know, things get really bad sometimes, you know, when dealing with, you know, anxiety and depression, you know. It bothers you physically, you know, your weight, your appetite, your feeling to you want to do anything, you know, your drive, you know, you don't feel like, you know, you want to complete anything in life. You just feel you want to stay still. You don't feel worthy. You don't feel like completing that goal or task is important. And I know, because with the ups and downs of doing content creating, you know, some days I don't feel like putting out content, you know, some days I don't feel like cutting on this camera. You know, I get a little bit overwhelmed with, you know, the things I have planned and the ideas, and also the success rate of the ideas, you know, and posting the video. So I just, you know, like I said, like I said, I just want to be, you know, forefront and honest, you know. Even my peers don't know this about me. You know, I've been keeping this a secret, you know, for a very long time now, but I can't keep something a secret that you have to use your naked eyes and see that is showing. You can't fake something that's showing. And you just have to be honest with yourself, and people can believe whether they want to or not, because we live in a world where you could be as genuine and transparent as you want to, but ultimately people are gonna judge. They're gonna look at you. They're gonna look at you like you're not keeping it 100 when you are. You know? I used to see myself as being this strong being, as being this strong person, being able to withstand anything. Well, forward that 10 years down the line, everything I've faced lately, I can't. You know, it compounded and it got bad. You know, some of the most spiritual people, whatever you want to call it, you know, some of the most mind, you know, steady people get unhinged and get you know, get depressed very badly. And, you know, it's not always about relationships. You know, it's not always because of a relationship. You know, it could be from just you know, overwhelming of wanting things to be positive in your life, and you could be surrounded by negativity. It can be just like that. You know, that's why I say to anyone who watches this video, you know, you're not alone. I know what you're feeling, you know, and my heart goes out to everyone that's like me and has to deal with it. You know, we seek help. We want help. We don't want to be this way. We didn't ask to be this way. You know, we want help. But sometimes there's not always good help out there. Sometimes you get people to catch you in a vulnerable state and have other ulterior motives. And, you know, I've saw this single-handedly, not only with myself, you know, going through it. I've saw this with people. You know, people use people now to substitute their depression now. People introvert people's time so they don't have to be alone, and they don't, you know, have to feel, you know, they don't have to feel depressed and emotional and stuff like that. People use people's time now to hide away from their trauma, when you don't know you're making things very bad now. Because now when you're that individual, everything comes to you like a crash course now. You're gonna feel everything. And mercy on your heart, because some people can't take it. You know, if you know what I'm saying. Some people can't take it. Can't take the pressure, can't take the worry. And that's where suicide comes in. Contemplation of unworthiness and loss. I know this all too well, because some people look at me as being, I'm not as strong-minded as you think I am. I'm not as, you know, I might talk, you know, I might talk like it and everything like that, but I too, you know, have flaws. I too, you know, I too have moments of worry and, you know, overwhelming and you know, stressful times where sometimes you just can't get the right answer. Sometimes people could sit there and talk to you, and, you know, and it's appreciated. It's not like it's not appreciated. It's just that it doesn't fulfill what you're looking for, because I believe if you don't understand it, then you can't give the next person any pointers or advice or you know, feel what they feel. You know, if you haven't genuinely went through it, then you can't tell anybody, you know, about what they're going through. You know, this is what helps someone. You know, if you haven't been through it, then you can't help anybody. You know, like I said, I decided to do this live. I decided to do this, you know, unplanned. I decided to cut this camera on and be honest with you guys. You know, I used to be 400 pounds. I used to be 400 pounds and, you know, eat myself to oblivion. You know, I used to be the most confident guy at one time, but nowadays I'm not as confident as I am. Like, even when talking to a woman and everything, you know, you guys see the Rate Me videos, see the Rate Me shorts, but it's not as easy as you think, you know? It's not as easy as you think. Because sometimes, you know, I worry. Yeah, I may get a haircut, I may have a decent outfit on that day and everything like that, but I still worry, you know? I can't really pinpoint about, you know, which per se that I worry about, but I worry, period. And I have depression and anxiety on a regular. It deals with insomnia, you know? It deals with insomnia, you know, lack of sleep and lack of, you know, self-encouragement. Some days I just want to just sit in a spot and just cry. If you know, you know. And I don't care who knows this, who you know, of what you know now. This is me. This is the chapter of my life, being honest with myself. This is not for views. This is not for popularity. This is me on my channel being honest with you guys. Want you guys to know me. I'm not trying to be like none of these guys. I'm trying to be like myself. Individuality is my biggest thing I believe in. Separating myself from all the rest. So if it means letting you guys enter this personal chapter of my life, then so be it. I just want you guys to see that. And I want you guys to be able to share with me about your traumas, you know? And we talk about this, you know? We talk about our experiences and, you know, and all of us as a community, you know, as a community, just to talk. And I believe that it brings us together and we can help one another. So this has probably been the most realest video probably I ever post. So congratulations. You guys know now that I suffer from depression and anxiety. And I just want you guys to understand.